Imagine living in a town where everyone knows everyone, where doors are left unlocked and children play freely in the streets. Now imagine discovering that the person who's been murdering your neighbors isn't a drifter passing through or a criminal hiding in the shadows. It's someone you've trusted for years, someone who's been right there all along, wearing a smile that conceals unthinkable darkness. This is the story of Wichita, Kansas, and the man who turned a peaceful community's sense of security into a decades-long nightmare. His name is Dennis Rader, but the world would come to know him by a far more chilling title, BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. Between 1974 and 1991, 10 innocent people lost their lives at the hands of a killer who seemed to vanish into thin air after each brutal attack. What made this case extraordinary wasn't just the horrific nature of the crimes, but the shocking revelation of who was behind them. For over 30 years, BTK lived among the very people desperate to catch him. He attended church services, led a Boy Scout troop, worked as a compliance officer enforcing city regulations, and raised a family in suburban normalcy. The truth about Dennis Rader would shake Wichita to its core and force an entire community to reckon with a disturbing question: how well do we really know our neighbors? The terror began on January 15, 1974, when Dennis Rader committed his first known murders. He broke into the home of the Otero family in broad daylight, prepared with a carefully planned kit that included rope, tape, and weapons. Joseph Otero, his wife Julie, and two of their children, 11-year-old Josephine and 9-year-old Joseph Jr., became his first victims. The brutality was methodical and deliberate. Rader would later describe in court how he strangled each family member, treating their deaths as if he were following a macabre checklist. The surviving Otero children, who were at school during the attack, came home to discover a scene that would haunt them forever. The Wichita Police Department had never encountered anything like this. The randomness of the attack, combined with the level of violence, suggested they were dealing with someone extraordinarily dangerous. But what came next was perhaps even more unsettling than the murders themselves. In October 1974, a letter was discovered inside an engineering textbook at the Wichita Public Library. The author took credit for the Otero murders and outlined details only the killer could know. He signed it with the moniker BTK, explaining that this represented his method of operation. The letter was cold, detached, and revealed something chilling: this killer wanted recognition. He wanted to play games with the police and the media, and he wasn't finished. Over the next 17 years, Rader would claim 6 more victims. Each murder followed a similar pattern of stalking, breaking and entering, and methodical execution. His victims included Catherine Bright in 1974, Shirley Vian Relford in 1977, Nancy Fox in Night and Hedge in 1985, Vicky Wagerl in 1986, and Dolores Davis in 1991. Between these killings, he would send taunting communications to local media and police, sometimes including photographs of his victims or items taken from crime scenes. He wrote poems about his crimes, created word puzzles containing hidden messages, and even proposed titles for a potential book about his murders. The city lived in fear, never knowing when or where BTK would strike next or who among them might become his next target. Then, in 1991, the communications stopped. The murders stopped. For 13 years, BTK went completely silent, and investigators wondered if he had died, moved away, or been imprisoned for another crime. The case grew cold, relegated to the unsolved files that haunted the detectives who had dedicated years to catching this phantom. But BTK hadn't gone anywhere. Dennis Rader was still in Wichita, still going about his daily routine, attending his Lutheran church, enforcing animal control ordinances, and measuring grass heights as part of his job with Park City's compliance department. Neighbors would later recall him as strict, sometimes petty about minor violations, but entirely unremarkable. He was the definition of ordinary, hiding in plain sight while carrying the weight of 10 murders. The case roared back to life in March 2004 when BTK broke his silence. The Wichita Eagle newspaper received a letter containing a photocopy of the driver's license of one of his victims along with photographs from the crime scene. He was back, and he wanted attention again. Over the next several months, he sent multiple packages to media outlets and police, including a special case cereal box containing writings and personal items from his victims. Investigators realized that his need for recognition had become his weakness. BTK's ego, his desire to be acknowledged and remembered, would ultimately lead to his downfall. The break in the case came from an unexpected source: technology. In February 2005, BTK sent a floppy disk to a local television station, asking in a previous communication if such a disk could be traced. police had cleverly responded through a newspaper ad assuring him it would be safe. It was a lie, and Dennis Rader believed it. When forensic analysts examined the disk, they found deleted metadata revealing a document had been modified at Christ Lutheran Church by someone named Dennis. A quick internet search led investigators to Dennis Rader, president of the church council. Within days, they had obtained a DNA sample from his daughter's medical records through a valid subpoena, which matched DNA recovered from BTK crime scenes. The net was closing. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested while driving near his home in Park City. The news sent shockwaves through Wichita and the nation. Journalists descended on the quiet suburb. Neighbors struggled to reconcile the helpful compliance officer with the monster who had terrorized their city for decades, and Rader's own family was devastated. His wife immediately filed for divorce. His daughter wrote about the trauma of learning her father was a serial killer, and the community he'd been part of for so long felt violated in a way that went beyond the murders themselves. The trust that binds communities together had been shattered. During his confession and subsequent court appearances, Dennis Rader showed little remorse. He spoke about his crimes in clinical detail, referring to his victims as projects, and describing his need to kill as a compulsion he couldn't control. Psychologists and criminal profilers have since studied his case extensively, noting his apparent lack of empathy and his narcissistic need for attention. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole after 175 years, essentially ensuring he would die in prison. Today, at 80 years old, Dennis Rader remains incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. The BTK case fundamentally changed how law enforcement approaches cold cases and serial murder investigations. It demonstrated the power of keeping cases active in the public consciousness and the potential for new technology to solve decades-old crimes. It also served as a grim reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself with obvious warning signs. Sometimes it looks like the man next door who waves hello. Sometimes it's the person enforcing the rules in your neighborhood, and sometimes it's the fellow parishioner sitting in the pew beside you on Sunday morning. Wichita has worked to heal from the trauma BTK inflicted, but the scars remain. The families of his victims continue to live with their losses, and the community has had to rebuild the sense of safety that was stolen from them. This case reminds us that darkness can exist anywhere, hidden behind the most ordinary facades, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. If this story has gripped you the way it gripped an entire nation, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the cases that changed history. Drop a like on this video if you appreciate the research and storytelling we bring to these important stories, and let us know in the comments what case you'd like us to cover next. We're building a community of people who want to understand the darker chapters of our world, not to glorify them, but to learn from them and honor those who were lost. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.